You are welcome to today's lesson. So, in this part of the section, we will examine the marking criteria and the assessment that is used to grade your report. Grades in the IELTS is called band score. So, when you hear band score, it means you are dealing with the grade. So, the band scores start from the lowest band, which is band 1, to the highest band, which is band 9. So you have a band score of 1 to 9. And as stated, a band 1 is the lowest band score, while band 9 is the highest band score. In as much as you desire to get the required band score for your writing tax 1, it's more important to know what and what not to do. So what to do and what not to do. So it's very necessary to be aware of what the examiners are looking out for before you can know exactly what to write. So we will look at the marking criteria, that is what is based on when they are marking your work. All right, so we look at what the examiner is based on to mark your work, and then we can go on with the other section. The assessment of your writing is based on 4 pillars. The examiners are very strict on this and are looking forward to seeing you include all the required factors in each of the criteria for you to get the score that you need. You'll be marked based on the content of what you write to each of the factors in the grade point of the criteria. So when we look at the 4 criteria and we take one of them, they will mark you based on what you wrote and compare it to the exact thing that they need within that particular criteria. So it's very important that you understand the keys in each of these criteria so that you can do a self-test on what you have to write, right? And what you don't have to do in order not to let your grade fall. So first of all, let's examine these 4 marking criteria. The writing test is graded using 4 factors. These are: 1, the tax achievement. When we talk about tax achievement, this is the part of the grade where they check whether you have been able to fully answer all part of the question. So when the question is given to you, as we learned from our previous lessons, they are divided into several parts and you have been asked to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So the tax achievement here is to examine whether you have been able to do everything necessary to meet all the tax in the question. So that is what we mean by tax achievement. So the examiners will be looking at several factors in this particular section. Now let's go on to the next one: coherence and cohesion. So this section will measure how well your ideas that you are using, right? So the ideas that you are using, it will measure how well you are using those ideas and they are making sense. Okay, so it will measure the idea that you are using and how they make sense. Also, it will check how each of these ideas are well linked together with each other to form one single unit. Okay, so the ideas that you bring up, the features, the main features that you are using, how well are they linked? How have you been able to compare things? How are you correlating each other in order to make them sensible? How they will be able to be clear, how they are clear when the examiner is reading it. Okay, so it's important for you to also check that side, and that is what the examiners will be using to assess you. So this is where they will check for some coherent devices cohesive devices, and also some linking words. Okay, so they'll be using all these to assess you. Now let's move on to the next type, lexical resources. So lexical resources, as the name suggests, is about the lexicons, it's about words. So the resources, your words resources, you are assessed on the correct number of words that you use in the essay, which makes sense and fit the topic that you are dealing with. So the words that you use, the synonym that you used, okay, the structures that you use. So they are looking at how wide your vocabulary is when it comes to a particular context. This is not something that you should just be going about looking into dictionaries to look for words. It means they are assessing you on content related vocabularies. Okay, so how well your words are correctly used and appropriately used in context. So that is what we mean by lexical resources, and the examiners will be they'll be checking all that. Okay, they'll be using skill to check all that to make sure that you meet the task. Let's go on to the last one, grammatical range and accuracy, which in this particular test or this particular marking criteria is the last one. Okay, so this one will assess on how you can use your grammar properly. So they assess you on your grammar and how you can use them properly, and in a variety of ways. Okay, so how well you can use your vocabulary, the number of vocabularies, how wide it is. Okay, so the tenses, the word structures, sentence structures, all these things are very important that they will say. So the examiners will check these four. They will mark you based on these four: task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resources, and range, grammatical range and accuracy. These are the four categories that the examiners will base on to score you, and they are all sharing equal percentage of the marks. So task achievement has 25%, coherence and cohesion will take 25%, lexical resources will take 25%, and grammatical range and accuracy will take 25%. So it's very important for you to note that all these things have equal marks, equal percentage when it comes to the marking. So don't take any of them lightly. As stated in our previous lessons, the writing task 1, in the writing task 1, you'll be shown a diagram which might be either one or more than one diagram, and the examiners will now ask you to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and then make comparisons where relevant. What you are required to do when given that particular phrase or sentence is that you are now to change what you see in the visual diagram into a text. So you are looking at the picture and you are now converting these pictures into a text for the person to read and understand. So as part of the task, you will have to divide your paragraph into 3 forms. So your essay will be broken down into 3 parts. Basically, you have the introduction, you have the overview, and you have the part which is also showing the key features and an illustrated data. So you have to get the part of the essay which will have the introduction, and the introduction is just basically the first part of your essay, and the overview, which will be a summary of what you see, and then you have to also present and highlight key features and also figures that you see in the text. In each of them, you look at some of the things that you are supposed to do. Remember, we are dealing with the marking criteria and assessment, so we look at some of the things that you are supposed to do and what you are not to do in respect to the 4 marking criteria in the writing task 1. So let's start with the introduction. The reason for your introduction is that you are about to tell the examiner what you are going to write about in your own words. Take note. So the introductory part of your report is where you're going to present to the audience that this is what the graph that I'm going to show to you is about. Okay, so you're going to tell the examiner this is what I'm going to say, or this is what I think the whole graph is about. So it's basically a question paraphrased. Basically, it is the question that you are paraphrasing. Paraphrasing here means that you are rewriting it in your own words. For instance, what the visual diagram is, okay, where the data you collected the diagram is, and when you collected that particular data. So you are going to just rephrase those statements in your own words. Okay, so that is what exactly you are going to do in the introductory part of your essay. So when you take the introduction can be in one sentence. Okay, so the introduction can be in one sentence, and also the introduction is the question rewritten in your own words, which means to paraphrase. Okay, so you are going to write it. It can be just in one sentence or two, nobody cares, but actually introduction should be in one single sentence. And also it is the part of the essay where you rewrite it in your own words. So you're going to just rewrite what you see in your own words. Remember that there are two diagrams in your task. Remember, if there are two diagrams in your task, you need to introduce both of them. Okay, if you have two different diagrams in your task, you still have to introduce both of them, and this can be done in one sentence or two sentences. Now, when you are writing an introduction, make sure it is clearly written. Your introduction should be what you are seeing in the picture that has been given to you. So is what the graph is about. So you are asking yourself, what is the graph about? Write exactly what the report is about and avoid any irrelevant information. Very important. Take note of it. Irrelevant information should be avoided. Irrelevant information is made up of any kind of information that is not necessary in the report. For instance, when you are writing an introduction, it's not important for you to write the color code in the essay. Actually, even when you are writing the report, there is no need for you to state what the color code means and everything. Okay, so it's not necessary for you to state that. For instance, you are not supposed to say maybe the x-axis shows, or maybe the y-axis represents. No, you don't have to do that. Okay, so you are not also to talk about the color code, like maybe the red section or the red color is for bicycles, or the blue color represents females, number of females admission. Okay, so you don't have to bring all that in. So irrelevant information is very, very necessary for you to avoid. If you don't do that, you will reduce the bound score. Okay, so that is the first thing you should know. Let's move on to the next thing that you should do or note in the introduction. Write it in your own words. The introductory part of the essay is there for you to tell the examiner what you think the report is about in your own understanding. So you can use synonyms and phrases, but make sure that the idea of the essay is still kept. So if you are using synonyms to change some of the words into your own words, you have to make sure that the idea of the topic is still there. For instance, if you're having something like students, you can say people who are studying in school. Okay, so you can just change that, or maybe a date. 1900 to 1999 is a whole 90 years in between. Okay, so instead of saying 1900 to 1999, you can say 3 decades. Get it? 3 decades from 1900 to 1999, or maybe just 3 decades, and you are done. Okay, so that one will show the 90 years in between. One thing you shouldn't do is that you should not don't copy the question word for word, okay, or even take phrases word for word from the question. So you should not, if the question, whatever the question is, don't copy the question as an introduction. That is one thing you shouldn't do. Don't copy the question word for word or phrases from the question given to you, right? You will not earn any marks from that. They will actually not consider that particular sentence, and you will short number of words written. So don't copy it. If you do a copy, or if you copy, you would get, I think, a band 1 or 0. Okay, so a band 1, actually a band 1, you'll be getting a band 1 if you are seeing copying word for word. Okay, so don't actually do that. Don't copy word for word. Write the question in your own words. Okay, write it in your own words. All right, so let's move on to the next. So make sure you maintain the unit of measurement and the key facts in the introduction, right? So if the introduction is about, if the unit of measurement is about maybe money, okay, right? So it's about money, and you have the unit for maybe pound, right? A pound sign there, or maybe a CD sign there. Make sure that still you are maintaining that unit of measurement. Don't change the unit of measurement, and don't change the key facts in it. For example, maybe the date or the time or country or gender. If it's talking about Ghana, don't change Ghana to Namibia. And if it's talking about 2003, don't change the 2003 to 2005, right? Don't use inaccurate synonyms. You are not to use inaccurate synonyms for the keywords that have been used in the essay. So you should not use inaccurate synonyms for the keywords in the essay. For instance, maybe you have been given that the people, you are looking out for unemployed people in Kumasi. All right. So if the question is talking about unemployed people in Kumasi, don't change it to unemployed Homo sapiens in Bibiani. Homo sapiens is not actually an accurate word for people, okay? And the word the question was not talking about Bibiani, it's talking about Kumasi. So make sure you keep that date, make sure you keep the country, make sure you keep the right facts in the question, and don't use any inaccurate synonym in the test. Let's look at the last point you should note in the introduction. Finally, in the introduction, you are supposed to introduce all the charts and diagrams or tables that have been given to you. This means that you should use the specific name of the graph given to you in the question. For instance, if you are given a bar graph, state that the bar graph or the table or the line graph. Okay, so make sure you are able to state that thing. Just imagine yourself before an audience and you are trying to present something or a picture to them. You can't just state that the diagram, right? If it's a table, you have to tell them that you can see on the table. So you have to state the type of diagram you are using. You will, in actual sense, when you are dealing with this, you in actual sense mention the name of the graph and what it is about. So make sure the specific graph name appears in the introduction. Let's look at some sample introductions and see how we'll be able to introduce them if we apply the information that we have received. Okay, so let's look at some kind of introductions that we will be looking at or we will be using, and see how we can apply these tips to it. So let's look at some sample introduction and see how we might introduce them if we apply the information that we received. You can see the table. So you can see that this one shows the actual diagram we are using. So the table illustrates employment numbers in Australia. So it shows the place where the data was collected over a 30-year period, right? So it shows also the how long, right, or when it was taken, a 30-year period from 1970 to 2000. The second one also shows the bar chart, right? The bar chart compares the number of cars that were made in France, Germany, and Norway over a decade, right? So decade here shows 10 years, so from 2000 to 2010. You can choose to even ignore the 2000 to 2010 to just hold it like this. The bar chart compares the number of cars that were made in France, Germany, and Norway over a decade. So you can see the first one, which is the table, has been written clearly here. We know that this is a table, and it also shows the place where the information was collected, or where we are actually dealing with that particular information, which is Australia. And it also tells us when, or the time, that this information covers, and it's about 30-year period from 1970 to 2000. Same thing applies to the bar chart, which compares also the number of cars that were made, and what or where we are dealing with is France, Germany, and Norway, and the time period, which is decade, right? Can you even see what we are dealing with here with the cars, right? This one to shows employment. All right, so all these things, all these facts need to be within the introduction, and don't change the information, the facts in the information, and don't use wrong synonyms to change it in such a way that it will lose the basic idea of the question. Now let's look at the overview and also check on what and what not to do based on the marking criteria. So when you take the overview is basically summary. Remember this, when we talk about overview, we are dealing with summary. So the overview in your response should summarize what you see on the visual diagram. So you have to summarize everything. For instance, if you look at the picture for about 2 seconds, what can you say with your eyes closed, right? So if you look at the picture for 2 seconds, what can you say about the graph with your eyes closed? So that tells you that you only find the most important or the prominent part of the visual diagram. That is what you'll be able to look at. So you will summarize in the overview. You are supposed to summarize the trend or changes that is happening. If it's about process diagram, you check the stages or some of the noticeable features that are within the question. So these are some of the things that you should be looking at. So if you want to get a band 7 and above in your overview, you have to present a very clear overview to reach that particular band score. So let's look at the tax achievement band descriptors and see how important a clear overview in the IELTS academic writing tax 1 is. All right, let's start from the band 7. We look at the band 7. it tells us that the essay will present a clear overview. It means the data will be appropriately categorized. So when you are writing the overview, the examiner expects you to put your points in categories. So if it's about those that move high should be compared to those that move low, it has to be well categorized. And the main trends and differences are also identified. Are there any main trends? Are there any differences? Have you been able to put all of them together? So the overview should clearly summarize the picture. Okay, so that's how a well-balanced Band 7 overview will look like. It should be able to clearly summarize the picture very well. Now, how will the person get a Band 6? If you look at the Band 6 overview, the person gives a relevant overview, and that overview is attempted, which means that the overview has been partially covered, right? So some part of the figures have been given, but the others have been left. Okay, some part of the figures have been given and others have been left. For instance, if you have 4 different variables, this Band 6 overview will show just about 1 or just 2, leaving the others. None of them was compared. So that is what we mean by attempting, right? The person just attempts the overview. So a Band 5 essay, the person will have a tendency to focus on details without referring to the bigger picture. What do you see generally? So the overview should be a general understanding of the graph, not a specific detail given. So if you focus on detail instead of referring to the bigger or the general picture of the essay, then you are going to get a Band 5 in your overview. With all this said, it means when you are writing the overview, these are some of the things that you should do to boost your score. 1, you should use linking words to summarize what you see. So you can start by saying to summarize, or overall, or in summary. Okay, so don't go and use other weird words. You can just use overall, to summarize, or in summary to start your word, and that will be okay. Don't include data or figures in your overview. As we studied, this one will lead you to a Band 5 and even less. So don't include data or figures or details in your overview. Only let it be a summary of the main trends or features. So the details will come in the main features when you are describing them. Don't include them in your overview. The second thing you should notice that in the overview you should look for trends in the diagram. Okay, not all of them. Sometimes there are some of them that do not demand trends, but you should also be using comparisons. So you should look out for the main trends, and you should also finally look out, you also have to compare, right? Very important. You need to compare the data or the variable. So there have to be 3 things done here in your overview. Your overview should have linking where it starts the whole thing, right? Like overall, in summary, or to summarize. You should also look out for the main trends in the diagram. And when looking out for the trends in the diagram, these trends should cover, it should encompass the question. It should encompass the graph. You should not just be partial about it. You should not just write one side and leave the other. If it comes to writing the trend, write some of the trend and compare others, making sure that it covers the whole graph as is seen within the picture. And you have to make sure that you are comparing the data as well. So this is what you should be doing to boost your score within the overview. Now let's look at what is expected of us when we are to report the key features. Now, in your IELTS Academic Writing Task 1 response, you must present the key features and use data to support your description. Take note, you present the key features and you use data to support your description. So the key features are the features that stands out the most in the diagram. All right. So if you look at the diagram, what is the most prominent part of the essay that everybody will talk about it? What is the obvious part of the essay that everyone will talk about it? So that is what you should be calling the key features. So if you look at the band descriptors that we are going to look at right now, you will notice that you need to provide a very clearly presented key features. You should be able to provide clearly presented key features to achieve a band 7 or higher. So let's look at the band descriptors and see what's expected over. So in the band 7, for you to write a band 7 essay when it comes to the key features, they tell us that the key features in the band 7 are clearly selected and are covered and clearly highlighted. Okay, so remember, highlighting means that you have been able to open up the key features, described it properly, compared every part of it. Remember that we are supposed to summarize, compare the key features, and make and report it when necessary. Okay, so all these things have been clearly done with good illustration and data covered. So that is what will help you to get a very good score in your key features part. All right, when it comes to the task achievement. Now, if you look at the band 6 essay, it states that the key features which are selected are covered and adequately highlighted. Adequately highlighted key features. So the person stated the key features, but has a lot to be done to it. It was mentioned, but has a lot to be done to it. So let's look at it. It said that information is appropriately selected and supported using figures and data. But what happens? Some irrelevant. So as you remember, we talked about irrelevant data. So some of the data that is not important, they are not needed. You can find the person writing a lot, but some of the information is providing, they are not needed in the task. Also, the person provide inappropriate one. So they are there, but they are not used appropriately. They are not used in the right way. Though the data should be used, the key features should be used, or the data provided should be used, but that information was not used in an appropriate sense. So that is very important. That is very important. And while we go through the revision and time when we are looking at your essay, we will show you some of the inappropriate information that are being provided. So take key note of that. Irrelevant information that's not supposed to be there. Inappropriate information that is used but used wrongly. Okay, so it has been used but not in the right place. And inaccurate information. So inaccurate information is that you are providing a wrong data. So if the data is talking about, maybe on the graph, the data was about the number of ladies that actually were admitted in the senior high school in 2003 moved higher or were more than that of the men. But when you were writing, you wrote that the men were actually more than that of the women in that particular time. So you have provided a wrong information, and that is inaccurate information. So for you to get a band 6 is when you are providing all these kind of information, either irrelevant, either inaccurate, or inappropriate, and that they may occur in areas of detail or when illustrating or extending the main point. So when you are extending the main point and they mostly find these kind of inappropriate or irrelevant or inaccurate information in your data, then take note that you are getting a band 6. All right, so it's important for you to look at all of these and take them out. And for you to write and get a band 6, it means that your essay is missing details, right? So it means that some details are being missing, or there are being overuse of some of the details. Okay, so it has been too exaggerated. There is more exaggeration. Okay, so there is so for instance, the data showing that maybe the line graph, right? So the line graph, maybe the movement, okay, the change was mild. So there was a mild change, right? So the movement, maybe the rise was quite minimal. But when you are writing, you wrote that the movement was fast, was rapid. Okay, so that is an exaggeration. Okay, sometimes people use a word like rocketed, plummeted, while the thing was maybe, when you say rocketed, it means that the thing shot up like that and it went up very fast, in a very fast. But you go and check the data and it was like a slow or a moderate change. So that is an exaggeration. That is, you are using it excessively, you are exaggerating, or you are giving over extensive illustration. So that is very important. And if you do that, you are reducing your band score. You are reducing your band score. That is why it's very important to give an accurate data. And don't, if you are having some of the details missing, also you would be able to, you will get a band 6 when you see that. So we have been looking at all these, and it's very important for you to check, because that is what you will be using when you are writing your essays. Now let's look at what makes somebody get a band 5. A band 5 detail. He said the key features which are selected are not adequately covered. The key features are not adequately covered. Now check this one. Sometimes you might be given some variables, right? So you might be given some variables, and the variables are maybe like 5 countries or maybe 4 countries, but the person will just take 2 countries and talk about them. If you do that, you are going to get a band 5. So that's only few part of the variables will be talked about, instead of looking at the big picture of the essay and comparing them appropriately. So you find out that this person will just take one side of the essay and talk about it. So if the variables are maybe 4 or 5, the person will just talk about 2 of them, compare just 2 of them, and make the essay look different. So that is what it means by you selecting the key features but not adequately covering them. There may be a tendency of focusing on detail without having the big picture looked at, and that is what has been explained. When you hear something like this, recounting of details, mainly mechanical, when you hear mechanically recounting details, it means that you are writing on every dot point like a robot. This is an extra information I just provided for you to understand what it means. It means that you are writing on every point like a robot. There is no generalization. There is no, actually not generalization, but there is no point of giving us the big picture of the idea. Remember that this is not mathematics. This is English, and they want to know how you understand data, how you can rewrite these data in a form of in an essay. So when you are writing, for instance, let me give you an example. Maybe there is a data which is showing a line graph, and the line graph maybe start from January to December. So what you say, what you will see in this particular type of essay is that the person will write something like this. In January, the number of men were 2,000. Then it shot up to 5,000 in February. Thereafter, it became stable and still maintained the 5,000 in March. It then moved on to April, where it moved down to 2,500. Right? So you can see the person just describing every dot point like a robot. That is not how the data should be done. There may be no data to support the description sometimes too as well, and also there is no detailed reference from the graph from which it was written to support. So the first point as I was talking about was the mechanical writing, which you are not supposed to do that. If you write the essay in that way, you are getting a band 5. You not get anything more than a band 5, and it's very important that you look at the bigger picture of it. Secondly, for you to get a band 5 is when you write without any supporting data. All right, so the person just wrote everything in words. There is no data supported, and that when you do that, you are not going to get a very good score. There is no detailed features from the graph, or you are not having anything supported. For instance, maybe if it moved from 2000 to 2005, right? After some time, you should put in that it moved from maybe 2000 to 2005, right? That is what you should be writing. But the person just write raw without bringing in any kind of data on the graph, and that is wrong. If you do that, you will be getting a band 5. So avoid recounting detail and writing mechanically, and also avoid writing without having any data to support it. That thing should be stopped. Now, a band 5 essay will include also irrelevant, inappropriate, and inaccurate material in the key areas. Okay, so that is one thing also you have to look at. And also there is a limited detail when extending and illustrating the main point. So these are very important things that you should be looking at when you are writing your essay. As stated, don't recount detail. I don't want to see you writing mechanically when you are writing your essay. You should be able to give a very good picture of the essay without writing like you don't take one particular part of the essay and write from start to finish. Don't do that. You have to compare some of the data. You have to summarize the data. That is what you're supposed to do. All right, let's move on to what we have to do now. Now that we have been able to get every point that we need, let's look at what we have to do. So for you to successfully address the tasks that you are writing about, you have to describe the key features in the visual diagram, and also you have to use the data from the visual diagram to support the key features. So you have to get the key features, describe them properly, compare them, summarize them, and also use the data from the visual diagram to support these key features. Okay, so if it's about percentages, if it's about numbers, if it's about buildings, structures, rooms, you have to get the data to support that. Don't just write without supporting them with data. Note that from the band 5, we said that when you write without having any data in the visual diagram to support the key features, then you are going to get a band 5, because there may be no data to support the description or no detailed features from the graph, right, that was written to support the information. So if you write without having an accurate data from the graph to support it, then you are going to get a band 5. All right, now based on the information that we have received, let's look at what we should do when we are reporting on our main features. When you are reporting the key features, make sure that you present the figures given to you in the visual diagram. Don't present the data mechanically, as stated as we saw in other part of the lesson, as I taught you right now. Don't write something like this. In 1992, it was 2%. Then in 1993, it became 3%. Then in 1994, it was 6%. The examiners want you to understand. They want to understand your knowledge in English, not mathematics. So try to look at the big picture of the essay and present it as such. You are required to summarize and compare between variables, and not only report everything on one variable. You will get a band 5 if you do that. Secondly, you are supposed to present the correct data as shown on the visual diagram. So make sure that if it is 100, you are writing hundreds. If it's 1,000, you are writing 1,000, 10,000 and over. Make sure that you write the correct data there. Don't present any data incorrectly. If you present incorrect data, it will depend on the number, but you might get below a band 7. So make sure that you read both the y-axis and x-axis correctly to see what data that you are supposed to show. Okay, and also you are supposed to avoid complicated calculations. All right, some people like to write mean, median, and you are supposed to avoid complicated calculations. You are writing English test, not mathematics test. So if you are presented, remember to present the data as it has been given to you. All right, if there are some differences you have to show, you can show it minimally, but you should not complicate everything that you are writing. It should be clear and easily read. Finally, make sure that you use the right unit of measurement. Use the correct unit of measurement to present the visual data. For instance, if it's about percentage, make sure you are using percentage. Number, barrels per day, grams, kilograms, people. Make sure that you have been able to use the correct unit of measurement, and don't misread the data, all right, and present it incorrectly. For example, if they say that maybe females, don't go and write males, right? Don't go and write males. If it is females, write females. If it is males, write males. So you have to make sure that you are using the correct number or the correct unit to present on that particular data. All right, let's have a recap on what we have learned here today, and then we can finish this particular part of the lesson. So to recap on what we have learned today, remember these 3 things and you'll be on your way to achieving a high band score as you need within the academic writing tax 1. 1. Write a clear introduction and don't copy the question. Secondly, write a clear summary of what you see in the overview. Make sure that it covers the entire thing that you need in the graph. And also present and highlight the key features with figures. Okay, make sure you support what you have written with figures, and you are not writing mechanically. Okay, and you are making sure that you are presenting your data correctly and avoiding any inappropriate, inaccurate, and also irrelevant data. Finally, remember that academic tax 1 don't need a conclusion. Don't write in conclusion when it comes to academic writing tax 1. Okay, so that is one thing you should know. All right, take note that during your review section, we will examine each report that you give to us and show you some of the mistakes that you should not do, and also the correcting that you have done to. We will tell you to continue. All right, so this is all that we'll be talking about in the marking criteria section. There are a lot that we'll be dealing with when we are going on practical of what you have written, so you will know a lot about it. So go over this particular lesson. It's long but very, very important and well packed. So make sure that you recap on everything and assess it while you are writing your essay. I wish you all the best. Bye.